it was two dichotomies of drinking. Either you're fine, you have no issue with it, or you're an alcoholic. There was no in between. It was always a stratification of either you don't have a problem or you have a major problem. And what I learned from Annie is that there's this gray line and this continuum that we're all on.
Happy Sober Day, friends. Welcome to the Sobriety Diaries. My name is Nate. I am a grateful recovering alcoholic, 7 years from my last drink. The Sobriety Diaries is a video podcast where we share powerful stories of recovery told by those who lived them. Check us out at thesobrietydiaries.com for all things podcast related. And for all our video interviews, head over to youtube.com/Nate Kelly. Also, please share this podcast with just one person in your life who may still be struggling. You just never know what they may need to hear today. Recovery is possible. I am here with my new friend, Ken Middleton. How are you this morning, my friend?
Fantastic, Nate. Appreciate you having me. Super excited to talk to you and your audience.
Yeah, I appreciate your willingness to share your story. I know that alcohol is not your friend and sort of what you've been able to develop because I'm super impressed by it. But I always like to start to understand you a bit more and your personal journey and how we've gotten to sort of this platform that you have today. So I'd love to get to learn a little more about Ken.
Yeah, appreciate it, Nate. Yeah, so my last date of drug of choice, I know if you asked that at the time, was November the 10th, 2018. For me, it was alcohol. Okay. Fortunately, I just never did anything harder than that, but I did alcohol really, really hard. So it was
and that's hard enough for me.
Yes, absolutely. And just to give you a sense of my story, Nate, and I tell people this all the time, for me, and that's part of why I named my publication the name that I did. Alcohol was my best friend. It did everything that it was advertised to do and some. So I started drinking like a lot of people did in college. I didn't drink in high school, fortunately enough for me. Just didn't come across it for whatever reason, but started drinking. I was 19 years old. I wasn't someone who was shy, but I wasn't like overly zealous or the life of the party. I was that person that typically fit in with everyone, never really stood out in any respects, but I wasn't someone that was scared to talk to people either. But I did want to be that person. I aspired to be that person. I was somewhat envious of people who were those type of people. So when I started drinking and when I recognized that it made me more relaxed around the opposite sex, it allowed me to have conversations with anybody, no sense of anxiety that I had before. I was like, holy schmoly, like, This is it, right? So as you can imagine, I joined a fraternity, did everything that the fraternity stories do, and had a great 3 years after I started drinking. Because I didn't drink my freshman year, but from sophomore year on, it was amazing. So of course, living the college life and drinking, graduate from college, eventually end up getting a job in sales. And I tell people all the time, if you think college is the training grounds for drinking, sales is the advanced master's course for drinking. Like that is
your doctorate.
Exactly. That's what we do. I was paid to take my customers out, schmooze them, buy them drinks, feed them food, and just have a great time. And that continued, Nate, for probably 13 years, like 12 years. Had a great time, made a fair amount of money. And the problem in that scenario, especially when it comes to sales, that you don't think you have a problem because you compare yourself to those around you. So your drinking is relative. Yeah. So when I looked at my peers and even those that I aspired to be like within the organization who were doing really well, and for myself, I was doing fairly well, they were drinking as much or more than I was. So for me, I'm thinking if they're successful, I'm successful. I'm not even like the concept of drinking being a problem never crossed my mind. Here's what changed. So in 2017, I left my former company because I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Always had a desire to run my own business, to do my own thing, and decided at that time I was 36 years old and I just felt like it was the time to do it. So I left. A year goes by and I am busting my hump trying to be successful. I'm working not 80, 90 hours a week.
Wow.
I'm the marketing person. I'm the finance person. I'm HR. I'm everything.
Yeah.
And it is really, really hard. Like you probably attest to it yourself.
Yeah.
So super, super hard. And I said, okay, it might if I feel like I might have to go to corporate America. I was making some money. I wasn't making a lot of money, but I said to myself, if I go back to corporate America, I don't want to do it without being able to unequivocally say that I've given it everything. And I always knew, and as most of us probably knew when we were drinking, not thinking that it was a problem, but I did recognize the days after I would drink or had a night out, I wasn't 100%. I was probably 70%, 80%. I had this thing that I used to say that my 80% was good as most people's 100%. So I was good, right? But this just wasn't the reality of it all, right? So I had to change what my approach and what I was doing. I said, okay, if I go back to corporate America, I want to make sure that I have no regrets and no one can tell. I can look myself in the mirror and said I gave it 100%. So I told my wife, hey, babe, I think I'm going to start with girlfriend at the time, now wife, that I think I'm going to take a break from drinking. I just want to see if it makes a difference with work. And fortunately enough for me, she was willing to do it with me because, you know, she's just an awesome woman and an awesome girlfriend and now wife. So we did it together. And Nate, I made more money in the next 90 days, those 3 months of not drinking, than I had made in the previous 9 months.
Wow.
By far. It wasn't even close. Like wasn't even close, right? It wasn't like I made a little bit more money. It's like I made a shitload more money. And I was like,
crazy.
Okay, there's something here. Now couple that with sleeping better, able to exercise better, feeling better overall, mental cognition better, me and my girlfriend not getting in arguments about stupid stuff like we did when we drank, right?
Yeah.
All of that combined, and we looked at each other and was like, there might be something here that we might want to extend this for even longer. So, and the more I started to learn and read, I read the book Annie Grace's This Naked Mind, and what I discovered, Nate, is kind of what the reason I created AINYF and why I wrote Bamboozled. For me, it was two dichotomies of drinking. Either you're fine, you have no issue with it, or you're an alcoholic. There was no in between. It was always a stratification of either you don't have a problem or you have a major problem. And what I learned from Annie is that there's this gray line and this continuum that we're all on. And I just didn't realize it. And I had no concept of all of the things that I was giving up because I was drinking. Wow. And so the mission then became for me, I want to educate others of you can drink if you want to. And I tell the people this all the time. I'm not a crusader of anti-alcohol. I'm just not. That's not what I feel. But what I want to do and what I am a crusader of is people being educated on the trade-offs they're making every time they do decide to drink. And hopefully they decide not to, because there's a much better version of your life and yourself that you can create if you're willing to do so.
Wow, that's so true. And, you know, you said a couple of things I want to touch on, but I think one that stands out most is, you know, when people give it a whirl, you know, and we have these things like dry January or sober October. And, you know, when you start to realize benefits, right, of not drinking. And a lot of times we hear better sleep, you know, to your point, better relationships, but to hear revenue side of things and the money side of things is kind of fascinating, honestly, and something that I haven't heard before. But if you think about it from an entrepreneurial perspective, it makes so much sense. You're firing on all cylinders, right? You're at your best, you're at peak. And especially for someone in sales, it kind of just makes sense.
It's insane, Nate. I mean, so I was able, every day I was thinking at that top level, because what you don't recognize is the opportunities that you're probably missing because you're not at 100%. So for me, I was able every day to be on 100%. And then everything that I was executing on, it seemed to work out. And I have to think it was because I wasn't having those lapses in judgment. I was really seeing things holistically. And then the reality of it, and this is what I share in my book, is that it compounds. Because it only allows you to recognize one thing that you wouldn't have recognized if you were drinking, that could be a great opportunity that then leads to another great opportunity, so forth and so on. And that's where I want people to see long-term wise, if you're willing to give this up, it only gets better with time.
Something else we have in common is alcohol was literally my best friend. It was
Yeah.
there to comfort me. We went everywhere together. It did, to your point, everything that I expected it to until it fucking turned its back on me. And that's when I decided to seek treatment.
Fortunately enough for me, and I say fortunate because there was nothing special that I did. I feel very lucky that I came to the realization I did before it became a problem. But I was well on my way to it becoming a problem.
Yeah.
And part of my, like I say again, I don't crusade to tell people that it's bad and you shouldn't do it. But I do believe if you drink consistently, there's a certain point where you cannot help but develop an addiction to alcohol. And I believe at the age of 40, and I say this in my book and I say this in AINYF, at the age of 40, you should just stop drinking altogether, because at that point, two things. One, the chances of becoming an alcoholic increase dramatically because the negative effects of how your body reacts to alcohol is different from when you're younger. And then two, the trade-offs that you're giving up when you drink alcohol are nowhere near the benefits you're getting from it. And I was fortunate enough to not realize it, but I was well on my way to where you were, Nate, because it's something that it was scary for me now. If I look back on it, that I was putting myself in a very tough situation.
It reminds me a lot. A close friend of mine, Blair Sharp, who has a blog, The Sobriety Activist, and she's been on the podcast several times. But part of her platform is this idea that we don't have to have this excruciating bottom or everything that's gone to shit in our lives to realize that alcohol is not working for us. We can simply decide that alcohol's negative impact far outweighs any benefit that it's providing in our life, and we can simply decide to remove alcohol from our lives, right?
Yeah, that's it, man. I use the term alcohol conscious. Nothing wrong with sobriety. Clearly, Sobriety Diary is the name of your work here, but I don't use the term sobriety because I feel like when you say, because this is what I discovered, right? Personal experience. When I stopped drinking, Nate, as soon as people heard that I wasn't drinking, the first question they asked me was, "Well, how bad did it get for you?"
Yeah.
They automatically assumed that I, as Blair said, had a rock bottom.
Yeah.
That something crazy had happened in my life, that I was out trying to sell my kids or something. Like, no, I just woke up one day and recognized that what I'm giving up wasn't worth what I'm getting from it. And I use the term alcohol consciousness instead of sobriety. And the reason I use alcohol consciousness, because it alludes to the fact that someone just says, alcohol is fine if you want to do it, but if I look at what I want to do in my life and what's beneficial for me holistically, health-wise, alcohol doesn't add to that equation. Just like fried food doesn't add into that equation, just like sugar, too much sugar does. So just like you're health conscious when you eat right and you think right and you exercise, you're alcohol conscious when you choose not to have it in your life. So it's a wellness decision. And I tell people, I don't consider myself a sobriety coach for any shape, form, or fashion, but I do consider myself a wellness advocate. And for you to mentally, emotionally, physically, to be the best version of yourself, if that's what you want, you have to remove alcohol from the equation, because there's no way you can do it with alcohol being a consistent part of your life.
Such a good point. And I think, from a coaching standpoint, this idea of overall wellness, alcohol consciousness is just a part of that, right? It doesn't have to be the be all end all. I think if we're, like being quirky is one part of my personality. It's not the entire puzzle. The fact that I don't drink is a part of Nate, not everything. I like to focus on development and wellness as a whole for myself, and not drinking alcohol is simply one part of that.
Absolutely. I have this thing that I call the inverted triangle. And at the base of this triangle, Nate, to exactly what you said, is alcohol. So it is the beginning. And that's what I recognize. Alcohol allowed me to for me, alcohol was the base of my triangle, of the thing that if I could figure this out, it gives me the ability to build on top of it. So I can say it starts with alcohol. Then I start to look at my sleep. Then I started to look at what I was eating. Then I started to look at my meditation. Then I started, so it allows me to build. So alcohol is the base that if you take that, then you can build your future on it. But for me, and it might be different from other people, if you remove that control of alcohol from me, everything else falls and crumbles in upon itself.
That's a great point.
It was the beginning of me to really start, to your point, go on that journey of wellness and being able to become the very best version of myself.
So I saw right above that is writing every day. Now, were you a writer always, or did it come from needing or wanting to share these facts with others who are alcohol conscious?
So prior to me giving up alcohol, I was wanting to write, but I was sporadic. On the days in which I went out and I'm hanging out with my friends, guess what? Wasn't waking up in the morning. I wasn't writing the next day, right? So instead of me writing 7 days a week, I was writing 2, 3, if I was lucky, 4 days a week. There's this great thing that Kobe Bryant always talks about. The reason he got great is because when you start out, I might be working 1 or 2 hours more than you are. But once you once you multiply that over time, those 1 and 2 hours a day becomes 10 to 12 hours a week, which over a lifetime becomes 3,000 hours or more work. So the difference of me writing 3 to 4 days a week versus writing 7 days a week was dramatic. And the commitment allowed me to get so much better at it and to really start to feel like I was actually doing it versus trying to do it, which is why I actually got to the point where I finished the book. Whereas before I would start and stop and just kind of hopefully aspire one day to write a book. So yeah, it was me getting up alcohol allowed me to really put enough consistent hits together to build something that I think I can look back on and be very proud of.